So you want to sell your clothes like the pros. Who knows why? Maybe you want a little more cash. Maybe you want to create those beautiful listings with the white out background, those crisp images, those descriptions that say stuff like, low ballers will be blocked. Stuff like that. You just want to be professional. You want your clothes to sell, and you want to understand the tools, the tips, the tricks that the high-end luxury resellers are using online. Well, today I'm going to show you. Friends, welcome back to the Brave New Wear Show. My name's Christian. Today I'm taking you inside at my work at Ina. I will be leaving here shortly, so I thought for prosperity I should pass on my tips and tricks. And essentially what I do here is I run a lighting studio where we shoot pre-owned garments and I list them on our website in various platforms. So what I want to do is kind of walk you through my process of shooting the garments, measuring them, listing them, and give you a couple of tools that you can utilize to resell your own clothes. And now, obviously, you're probably not gonna have a full lighting studio, but there are some tools, some elements that you probably can utilize to make your listings even better. And I'll show you a little bit more on the back with like Excel on how I keep everything organized and how I've used Excel in the past with private clients to kind of create a great outline of everything that you're shooting, everything that you're trying to sell it for, all those details that will give you a little bit of an edge and will help you if you really want to take selling clothes online a little more seriously. So let's get to it. So step one is you want to measure the garments. This is really important. Essentially, everybody's buying these clothes online and they don't have the opportunity to try it on. So you're trying to do everything you can to reduce the unknown element. And by measuring them, you're hopefully reducing the amount of questions that you have to answer, like how does this fit? Or does this fit true to size? Stuff like that. So what I do typically, if I have a top, I'll measure it pit to pit, like so. And then I'll take that measurement and double it and make that the chest. So I start by writing down the name of the garment. This is just like an outlier merino wool shirt. Nothing too fancy, but you know, it's a nice shirt. Then I take the length, which I take from the bottom of the collar all the way down to the hem. Then the shoulder. Sometimes this can be a little trickier. The shoulder on some garments isn't exactly where the seams meet the sleeves. Sometimes it's like there's a drop shoulder. Sometimes there's no obvious distinction of where the shoulder begins and the sleeve ends. And it requires some judgment. If you understand what the garment is, you can kind of say, oh, I think the shoulder ends here. This t-shirt's easy. I'm just gonna measure it from this seam to that seam. And then I take the sleeve. And this is kind of the standard measurements that people are looking for. I'll include a picture of the tag and I'll list the size in our listing. Lighting setup. We've got two fill lights that are like soft boxes and they're illuminating the backdrop. And then we have a key light that has this umbrella on it. If you go over here to my camera, it's nothing special. It's a really old Canon Rebel. We've got the switch right on top of it. This is, we don't need anything more than this camera guy. And to be completely honest with you guys, I didn't study photography. All of this I've kind of taught myself. I've watched videos online and I've experimented to see what is the easiest to edit, what comes out the best, what comes out the cleanest. So, you know, a lot of it, for me at least, has been a learning process. I've kind of figured out what works. But this setup is great, especially when we're shooting on a mannequin. This is how I begin. I always start by taking a picture of the tag, and that helps me when I'm going through the images. I know, oh, it's this garment. So I start with this. And you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just want them to be able to visualize the tag. And assuming that you might not have a mannequin, maybe you have a model, I would say if you have a model of somebody who will wear your clothes, this is kind of one way that you can set it up. And just a couple of tips about how I shoot and how I set up my camera. If you've got like a strobe or something similar, what I do is I don't set the shutter speed above 1/100. If it goes faster than that, say 1/125, or really 1/200, 1/300, you're going to get pictures that look weird. Basically, your shutter is moving quicker than the strobe is, and it's not capturing all the light. So the shutter speed has to be relatively slow. Depend on your camera, will depend on your lighting setup, will depend on your lens. What I have it set to is f-stop at 10, which is letting a lot of light in. And I have my ISO always set to 100. We're controlling the lighting in here, so we will always want the ISO at 100, and we'll play around with everything else to get it the right way. Because if you're putting your ISO up in a studio setting, that's silly, you're just gonna get a worse quality image. For the way that we shoot the garments, the way that our website is set up, and luckily the way that like Grailed is set up and all of that, we shoot all of our image vertically. In bigger studios with like PAs and like real cameras and not somebody who's just guessing at everything, they'll have equipment that's either like set up on a stationary tripod kind of thing, so everything is always shot perfectly. Assuming you're not like that and you're like me, you're holding your camera, just kind of give yourself a spot to stand, make sure you always have the focal length the same place, make sure the f-stop's always the same, so you can kind of always have pictures that look the same. They don't look all jagged and all over the place, one's bigger, one's smaller. You really want, it helps to make it look a little more professional if everything you're doing is always the same, and it's always also gonna keep you more efficient. Because if you're listing items like I do, where you're going through like hundreds each week, you really want to make sure you're not wasting time. Shooting on a mannequin, you're not shooting on a model. Probably you'll want to shoot the clothes so they like kind of lay flat. And my lighting isn't exactly set up for this scenario, but I can kind of fake it. I can get away with shooting the garments so they look like they're laying flat or hanging like I have them right here. Essentially, I put my fill lights, I kind of just place them closer to the garment. Here's the thing you gotta remember about this whole technique. I use these fill lights to illuminate my background, and that helps it when I edit the images. It's a lot easier to edit and make them look perfectly white. But since I'm putting them directly on the garment, I might run into some problems in editing them and getting it perfect. I think the way that people typically do this, they have a more advanced, complicated setup where possibly they're illuminating the background from the back, possibly they have one of those boxes or whatever, but this is how I do it. And guys, like I said in the past, I'm just freewheeling it. I'm not exactly sure if this is the most efficient way to do this. If you do know, comment in below and tell me what an idiot I am. But this is how I shoot it. So I just kind of take them, I hang them on the top of the rack, this background right here. Say I was trying to shoot a white tee like this, it would be very challenging. When I go back to edit it in Lightroom, the image, there's not gonna be a major distinction between this garment and this background, and when I go to brush out the background, it's gonna be very tricky. So this kind of, this setup can work for a garment like this, but you might find if you're trying to shoot a lot of white garments or white tees, it would be exceptionally tricky to edit it in post. So essentially, even just as they're shot, they already look pretty professional. You don't see, this is a vinyl backdrop, which kind of, just in a naked picture, it kind of looks a little wrinkly, typically, and that's why we brush it out so they just clean white. But if you have like a white wall with a nail, bomb. And you do happen to have any kind of strobe lighting, zip, zop, you don't have to spend a lot of money on these. You can get these on Amazon. Maybe you spend $100. You can essentially emulate this type of setup. Now, let's go to Lightroom and see what kind of magic we can do. I'm going to take the images that I shot and we're gonna open up in Lightroom. This is Adobe Lightroom. If you sign up for any of their packages, like for Photoshop, they refer to this as Adobe Lightroom Photoshop or whatever, Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. You wanna use this program when you're editing several images compared to like Photoshop, which is more for creating creative effects in like a single image that you're gonna spend a lot of time with. So to show you guys Lightroom, I'm actually back at my home computer. I didn't have screen capture at work, so I'm just going to use this image. We didn't shoot this today, but I'm going to show you how Lightroom works with this guy. Here we've got a Bape jacket that I shot in the studio some time ago. So we're going to go to the top right corner and click on the image and then go to develop. See, we've got the Bape jacket that we shot with the lights, but you can kind of see, if you look on your monitor, you can see the wrinkles of the vinyl. You can see this thing. We'll see how well we can kind of remove this thing, that little hook that I used. So this is what we're going to do. The first and one of the biggest parts of getting that perfect whited out background, and this can help, like if you have a white wall and you want to try to do this, you could probably use the same technique to get kind of this get a seamless background. So what we're going to do is go to the right and click on this little tool. It's called the adjustment brush. Going to click on that guy. And then as you can see, there's all sorts of effects that you can use with your adjustment brush. And what we want to do is go to the first one, exposure, and bring that all the way to 4. And before we even get started, we're going to scroll down and go click on this thing that says auto mask. So essentially what auto mask is going to do is when we're brushing the background, it's going to recognize that we're trying to adjust the white background and not the jacket itself. So we have that selected. Now this brush is a little big. I'm going to use the scroll wheel to make it smaller. And as you see, as soon as I start using the brush, it makes the background perfectly white. We're going to kind of go around the jacket, and you just could see I can kind of go on the sides of the jacket without there being an issue. It doesn't accidentally white the jacket itself. But I'll just show you as an example. If I accidentally go too far, even though we have the adjustment brush on, see, boom, that's not what we want. That's horrible. So I'm going to undo that. But we're just going to go and brush the sides all around to make this background perfectly white. And depending on how you shoot it, you can kind of get a better or a more white. You really do want the background to be illuminated. That way it will recognize, or it'll be easier to edit out this background when you go to it. Because if we have if the wall or the backdrop looks very gray, it's going to be harder to kind of edit it out to get this white effect. If you were using Photoshop strictly, you could probably just make a mask and do it anyway. But this technique is for when we're doing kind of images in mass. So for this last part, to kind of make sure I get these little details, I'm going to zoom in and just kind of brush it out. Brush that little thingy out. I keep that little hook thing white. That way I can kind of edit it out easier. And then it's kind of how much I actually want to go ahead and remove these things. I guess I'm going to keep that hook there. But for like a piece like this where we're like, I want to get rid of that little shadow there, we can go over here, we click on this guy, spot removal, going to click that, and I have it set to clone. I don't want to add heal, I want it set to clone. And then I'm just going to go over some spots. Say there's maybe you have a mark on your wall or whatever, and it's just not whiting out. You can use this little heal or clone brush, and then we're going to go zip and make sure that it's emulating white. And as you can kind of see, it's not perfectly white. There's still a little bit of detail. But I'm going to go ahead and clone a few of these spots. Nobody's going to be looking here, but I want to show you guys so you can do the same thing. But then you can go over it, and when you go over it again, it recognizes that you really want to get rid of that thing. It's actually supposed to be white. So let's zoom out. Boom. Perfect. Beautiful. Lovely. This is exactly what we want to do. I think this might be actually a little crooked when I shot this. So I'm going to go here, which is like the crop tool. Just going to straighten it a little bit. Now it's perfect. This is a perfect shot. And you can basically emulate this. If you have a strobe, if you have enough light on an image, you're going to shoot it and you're actually lighting the background. You can go into Lightroom, which is an affordable tool to own, and edit out the back so it looks perfectly white like this. You don't necessarily need a whole backdrop with all of the light setup that I had to kind of recreate this effect, because Lightroom gives you enough tools. And then it's easy peasy. Once you're done with this, you just go to library. We can go and export this image, and then whatever we want to do. And this is something you could do if you're working for a client, say somebody wants you to resell their clothes, or if you're just doing this for yourself and you want to keep detailed records. I recommend you do something like this. So in the far left corner, I numbered all the listings. I put the date that I actually listed them. We've got the brands, then a brief description, and following that, an asking price. And the person I was working with understood that this is what I'm going to try to sell it for, but I might not necessarily make that price. And they were ready to move the items, so they just kind of wanted to get them sold, and they wanted to make sure that they at least got what they're relatively worth. So essentially, as you look, I made these listings, and then I put the date sold, the platform it's sold on, the sale price, the shipping. We waited until it was delivered, and this is what we wanted to do. Once it was fully delivered, everything was taken care of, that's when I would send an invoice to be paid, because this took a little more, maybe 2 months, but this is kind of how we did it. So I waited until it was fully delivered before I sent it out with the commission, the invoice number, and all of that jazz, and I gave them their final profit. And knowing a little bit about Excel and asking my friends for help, I set it up so that all of this information, like the final profit and what they had to pay me and that commission and stuff, was all tabulated, so I didn't have to go manually. It's all tabulated in a little graphic to the side of this chart, but I'll show you a little bit. See, I made it color-coded so I can say, you paid me for this, I invoiced this, it was delivered, or it was sold. And so ultimately, all of this kind of stuff has to be read, showing that it kind of fully is completed. So I recommend you do something like this if you want to work with the client or you just want to keep detailed records. This is a convenient way to do so. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. And let me know if there's anything you have questions about. Let me know if you want to critique me about how I did it. And I'll catch you later.